Welcome everyone to the August 3rd, 2020 Public Steering Committee meeting. Please remember that there is a code of conduct in place and remember to be excellent to each other. This is also Kubernetes community steering meeting, so it will be recorded publicly on YouTube. So please remember that whatever you say will be recorded for eternity. Thanks, Lucky, for taking notes again. And let's get started with the agenda. First off, the election schedule.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring this up. I've been kind of liaising back and forth with the election officers for this fall's election. Josh put out to the steering list the proposed schedule for the election, including the contribution year. So looking at the statistics from August 1st of last year to August 1st of this year, then, you know, taking, like, basically starting now through the 12th, they will compile the list of electors based on the criteria that we set last meeting, which is 50 contributions plus being a member of either the Kubernetes or Kubernetes SIGs GitHub orgs. They've set nominations to close on September the 8th, open for voting and sending out the ballots on September 11th. Gives folks, you know, roughly a month, a little under a month, finishing up on October 6th, and then announcing the results on October the 9th. The only thing looking over those dates that I had a comment on is I know typically we've done the announcement of new, like the new members at a steering committee meeting, and Friday, October the 9th doesn't line up with that. If it was looking in October, it'd be the 5th or the 19th. Again, I don't know how critical that is or if anybody else like has thoughts, but that's what was submitted to us by the election officers.
Yeah, I had similar comments there. Like first one was definitely the announcing the results thing this October 9th. I was wondering if it could be moved a week like earlier, because that coincides with the Monday and the public steering committee meeting, or we could make it like move it one day ahead, one few days ahead to the next Monday and move the steering committee meeting there. I guess I would prefer that as well. The other thought I had was the election begins on a Friday. I don't really have strong opinions on this one. If maybe we could move it out on Monday so that it like it's on everyone's radar, but no strong opinions there.
Yeah, I didn't notice that one in my initial read through, but I agree, like opening things up on a Monday or a Tuesday, like even, I'd say I would have a preference for a Tuesday, because then everybody's getting back on Monday and we'll be going through a flood of emails. If we started the election and sent everything out on a Tuesday, then the ballots are hitting a cleaner inbox of folks, and hopefully they can act on them right away, as opposed to, you know, letting the ballots rot in their inbox for a while.
I'm
okay.
+1 for a Tuesday.
So the two suggestions going back to the election officers would be, can we start the election on a Tuesday? And can we finish the election, like close the ballots a few days ahead of time to give time for the election officers to like tabulate things and validate, but then announce the results at a public steering committee meeting would be the two kind of like suggestions that we're making back to the election officers. Any objections to that? Okay, great. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Jay, you had the next 6 security proposal.
I unmute and video. Clearly, I'm standing outside in front of the bridge. That's why when I move my hand real fast, you can see my background fade. Yeah, absolutely. So we've submitted a letter, and I can. Oh, good, you're sharing the screen. We've submitted a letter and a proposed charter, and great. This is the letter. If you want me to share my screen, I've got letter and charter both up. But in essence, yeah, we're here to talk about our pull request or to answer questions. What would you like? Would you like us to just kind of make a short verbal spiel, or do you want me to just hold back and take questions?
Go for it, Jay.
Okay, great. We've got a number.
Jay, before you start, do you want to share your screen and walk through?
Oh yeah, sure,
whatever
absolutely.
You're saying. I'll stop sharing.
Okay. I think I have to be permitted. Let's see. Share. Is this host disabled?
You might need to make him a co-host.
Yeah, I should be able to share now.
Okay. Awesome. I'm just gonna click and click and just do the whole thing. I've also got some of the signers of this letter with me. Let's move that off the screen. So basically, we're proposing that Kubernetes create a new SIG, and the folks that are writing below, we haven't given you our last names, but we're happy to. A number of us are here. So Aaron Small is here. Craig Ingram and Joel are also here, as well as Tim. The first 4 names here, we represent the co-leads of the security audit working group, and basically, we found that we did the first security audit on the Kubernetes code and the first threat model, and we found that we had a really good experience of doing that first code audit. We're getting ready for the next one. We had a great experience with creating that threat model, and when we went to KubeCon to present, we found that there was just a ton of energy. There were a ton of information security people that were looking for a way to contribute to Kubernetes. They were trying to find their way in outside of simply writing code, and they were eager to contribute. They were eager to have a way to gather and figure out how they could help. And of course, there were a good number of information security people within the Kubernetes community already. Beyond that, so we had a whole lot of energy and a whole bunch of people who wanted to help. We also found that at the end of an audit that there was, that there's more work to be done. And part of that, and I'm just making sure I'm talking to the right camera. Good, okay, I've got a couple cameras here. We found there was more to be done. Like the audit produced vulnerabilities that went into the PSC and started to get addressed or started to get marked as, well, that's intentional. That's how it's supposed to work. We found that one of the big things that our third-party companies that looked at the code with us and did the threat model with us, actually they did a lot more of the code examining. So to be clear, but they said you need to work on creating stronger defaults. You need to work on making it easier to harden this. And we've had a lot of community interaction about that as well. And so the idea started coming out of that to create a SIG for security, not to own the authorization code like SIGAuth does, but to basically gather these people and to work the way information security often works within projects, within organizations. And we've talked to a good number of people and people who have a lot of passion and energy. And that's part of what you're seeing in this list of names at the bottom. As an example, we have Liz Rice and Lori McCune who work on the CIS hardening guide, the CIS benchmark that serves as a hardening guide for Kubernetes. And they are, I'm just taking them as an example, they're very excited about creating a Kubernetes hardening guide out in the open as part of the Kubernetes project with contributors in Kubernetes and helping that drive what CIS has in its hardening guide. And honestly, just having the better experience of instead of being on a kind of semi-private web application to decide what the benchmark should be, actually doing that within the mechanisms we already have in the Kubernetes project, especially GitHub, which is a heck of a lot easier way to accept recommendations and changes and input and help. Yeah, we have a lot of excitement. So I'm going to show you our proposed charter, and I'm also going to look at your faces for a second and see if anybody's just looking bored out of their skull and wishes I'd talk faster or cover less. So not seeing anybody looking really bored. Great.
No, keep going, Jay. That's great context. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And everybody watching who isn't on screen and can't show whether they're bored, I apologize if I bored you. So SIG security is intended to be a horizontal SIG that covers security initiatives for Kubernetes, and that would include the ongoing security audits and threat modeling. It would also include helping out in the vulnerability management process, creating cross-cutting security documentation, including especially hardening guides and other mitigation guidance, and basically doing community building and education in the security community and helping to give the InfoSec folks a place to contribute, a place to funnel in, and a place to help. And honestly, I'll tell you as an InfoSec person, a place to find out like, hey, is this thing that I want to suggest something that's already been considered and done, so that we don't have like, you're going to, from our perspective and experience, you're going to have, as Kubernetes gets more and more popular, we're going to get a ton of information security people coming in who are really interested in helping, and having a place for them to gather and to find out how they can help, to find out what's been done already so that we don't overwhelm the SIGs. The other SIGs will be really, really helpful. So here's the areas. This is our chart. This is our proposed charter. Here are the areas that we've worked out and both in discussing. We've been working on this for a while, and these are the areas that that we've created, and we've been running them by other people within the Kubernetes community, including some of the affected SIGs. We've talked a lot with the product security committee, and part of the way we've been able to do that is I think 4 of the people who helped write this, who are named on that, who helped write this charter and are named in our letter, are on the PSC. So first area is basically helping with vulnerability management, and that's helping define the processes for when the private fix and release process is invoked and how the vulnerabilities are related, helping define the scope of the bug bounty, not running the bug bounty specifically. So that stays with the PSC. We'll be talking about how and when the vulnerabilities are announced, and talking about creating criterion process for sub projects of Kubernetes. Let's see, another part of that that's not named is helping to handle the just the external requests that are going to come in for comment on vulnerabilities or on mitigations. And you know, one of the people on our letter is Ian Coldwater, who, you know, in helping us draft this, said, "Listen, if you don't think you're going to, I'm going to see if I can make sure I use their words right. It was something along the lines of, if you don't think that you're going to have to handle both press inquiries and a ton of user inquiries, well, I would just expect that you're going to, right now, a ton of them just call me, because, you know, reporters will call the people they know and so on. So this is kind of part of the purpose here, is to give, for public vulnerabilities, especially for mitigations, is to give people a group to talk to and to be able to spread that effort around. So there's a suggestion that I haven't made as a change to this pull request, which is to, we just removed the first bullet, but we expect that what we'll also be doing is, and this is a really big part of what we want to do as SIG securities, is basically security outreach. So just giving that, I think I've spoken of this a good bit. So giving a place for information security folks or security-minded contributors to come and talk. And Aaron Small, who's here, had a great way of putting this. He said, InfoSec people are going to InfoSec. So give them a place to do it, or else it just happens at bars or what have you, and you don't get to find out what they were going to say to you. So giving them that kind of meeting point, and another part of that is basically answering security questions from inexperienced users, and that'll basically take a load off some of the SIGs, and also there'll be places where they just don't know what SIG to go to. So we end up being a kind of an entry point, and then we'll be routing contributors to other SIGs. We know as a horizontal SIG that when it comes down to it, that we're going to be, that we need to expect that we're attending other SIG meetings, not that we're asking all the other SIGs to attend ours. Of course, this is an open community, we're all welcome. Two more areas. So horizontal security documentation. I spoke to this, we're proposing this as a sub-project. So we'd be looking at doing hardening guides and best practices guides and articles, blog posts and whatnot. You can absolutely commit to, you can absolutely count on us to write our hearts out. Benchmarks, see if we can find places in the documentation where we can address questions. But the way I talk about this is I talk about this as documents and documentation, because when it comes to threat models and hardening guides, these are things that are beyond just simply writing the documentation, even though they become part of the project, and we're really excited about that. And the last one is the same security audit work that we've been doing as the working group. So the way we see this is the security audit working group disappears and is replaced by SIG Security, which has the security audit as a sub-project. We've got a big out of scope section, and I'm not sure how much to cover that in that same detail I've been hitting so far, but our focus has been to make sure that we are naming, that we're following both the requirements and the custom of making sure that people who are looking at this, who are looking at our proposed SIG, know where to go if something isn't ours. And so we've named it here. And then I think that's the big thing. I think this would be a great time for questions. If you want me to dig into the out of scope, we'll probably do that best by question.
Derek?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I guess I had a couple questions. So first, thanks, Jay, for doing such a nice job enumerating this. I kind of took down probably 3 questions. And so hopefully if I ask all 3, then maybe you can remember. But the first question I had was like,
I'll try.
Why a new SIG versus a sub-project of an existing SIG? So some thoughts I had in there were like, do some of these could some of these things be parented under, say, SIG Arch when providing cross-cutting guidance across the project? So maybe
Sure.
you could comment on that. And then the first point on what responsibilities is it actually taking over from the PSC, or are we saying that those responsibilities were not previously held by the PSC? So maybe you can talk through those two.
Cool. So that first question especially, but kind of both, we prepared a little bit and made sure that we could have a number of us who could speak to, why not take what we're saying and just divvy it up and push it under existing SIGs or working groups. And can I lean on Aaron and Tim to help me out there? And if you all just feel like you've been thrown under the bus, I'm happy to keep talking.
I don't mind buses. Yeah, I can speak for a second, and then I'm going to ask Tim to cover the gaps. I guess the biggest crux of it all for me, I think, actually stems around community building. There's a ton of different sub-projects that we're proposing be spun up under SIG security, and they all have their own reasons why they make sense to be independent. But the most important, I think the most telling, is this aspect of building an entry point for the InfoSec community to come join in the Kubernetes conversation. It is much easier to find a top-level group, is the bottom line. If you're looking for a way to get involved and you don't have context, you're not a big participant in the Kubernetes Twitter, and you don't join the Slack and chat, but you were doing an audit and you found a bug, or you think this Kubernetes thing is pretty interesting and you just want to get engaged, you're going to find a top-level SIG first. You'll turn up at SIG auth because it's maybe kind of the closest, but they don't have the framework to build a community and to ingest and then find the right home for work, and SIG security would. And that, I think that's the biggest reason. I know Tim's done a little more thinking on trying to find homes for these various sub-projects. I'm going to ask him to tag on.
Sure. I anticipated this question and wrote up a doc that sort of tackles it for each of the sub-projects that we discussed. I'm happy to share that out, or kind of talk through each individual one.
Yeah, I'd be happy to
share it back out
and Tim, if you wanted to share
it. Okay. And I've put it up on the screen I think I'm still screen sharing.
You still are, Jay.
Great, cool.
Yeah,
I will, as an example, I'll take an example real quick, just to give people give Tim a chance to share it out and be able to pick it up, to open it up. One example was for creating hardening guides. There are two ways that it really makes a lot of sense for this to be SIG security. One is that when we talk to people who are within SIG docs, who are trying to get going on creating some of this kind of security documentation, they were having a little bit of trouble, they were having trouble honestly finding as many contributors and just making that, making their kind of meetings regular and recurring. And they were really excited because at the end of the day, it's kind of easier to find, it's easier to get a lot of security people and then take a portion of them who can and want to write necessarily, than to take subject matter experts who want to write, than to find people who are generalists within a technology and pick them, and find, and sort through to find subject matter experts and get them going together. The other, well, I think that's probably one of the good ways to put that. I think the other reason for having that kind of SIG security is that just some of the focus of having that strong focus makes it a heck of a lot easier to get information security people who are contributing in other areas to work on things like hardening guides, to contribute, to make those 0.5% contributions, as opposed to the person who's writing 80% of the doc or what have you. And that ends up getting a much broader breadth of experience in. So I promise that wasn't just me delaying to give Tim time. That was something I wanted to say either before or after, but I just thought it makes sense to go first.
Yeah, so just to repeat my question, I guess, why not a sub-project of, say, SIG Arch? I see Tim has a docu that correlates with the SIG auth, and it sounds like the primary motivating reason was it's an easier entry point for InfoSec members to discover.
As an InfoSec person, I would never think to go check out SIG Arch if I wanted to contribute to the security of a project like Kubernetes. Tim, did you have anything else you want to say on that topic beyond sharing out the document?
Yeah, which ones of these did I consider SIG Arch for?
You mentioned it under the security audit bullet.
Yeah.
We called out is that SIG Arch is probably the closest fit for the security audit. But like I just said, it's not something that any of the security people I know or have considered joining. I think it's kind of, while it might make sense as an internal member, like from the inside, it might make sense. From the outside, it doesn't.
Yeah, I think I have sort of two answers to that. One is going back to the theme of building the security community around this. I think that these projects all tie together in a way that someone who's interested in one of these projects is likely to have thoughts on the other three. And so keeping them all together in the same place will help to, I think, help to build some of that knowledge across these different areas and kind of pull more folks into these different projects. So if we're considering pulling all four of these projects into SIG architecture, that seems like quite a bit of responsibility and scope to add to SIG architecture that I'm not sure we would want to. I would worry about kind of growing SIG architecture too much if we did that.
My other question to that point, and I wasn't advocating necessarily for them to go. I was just curious if there had been a thought to it, and so it looks like Tim, has always exceeded the bar here. So I'll read the doc in detail afterwards. The other question was, what responsibilities is the SIG taking over from the product security committee that may have been held there, or are we saying that we had gaps that were not being met?
Yeah, I can take that one. On the product security committee, we really want to get more involvement from the community to helping us to define the processes and the communications channels and the response timelines and all these kind of guidelines that we use to actually respond to the vulnerabilities. Because most of the current process we've sort of just made up as we go based on what kind of works for us and a very limited set of feedback that we've gotten. But we really see ourselves as providing a service to the community. And so we would like more feedback and input from that community that's benefiting from these vulnerabilities and in how can we make the process work better. So that's kind of the motivation for wanting to get a lot more public engagement with around the process. And in terms of what responsibilities we're looking to hand off, I'm not sure handing off responsibility is quite the right way of framing it, since I think all of the PSC members will still be involved in defining that process and to some extent have the final say in what the process is. But we're looking to get more community, and when I say community, I really mean kind of like public community engagement around all of the public parts of the security release. So basically everything that doesn't need to be private for security reasons.
So the PSC stays the private place, and then SIG security becomes the public forum. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So ideally, once we lift the embargo on a CVE and send out the announcement, then at that point, the PSC would essentially hand off the vulnerability management, or the kind of the remaining management of that vulnerability to SIG security.
And part of that, like part of what came up in our conversations there is that what the PSC does is, that the PSC's kind of level of, or I'd almost call it like amount of staffing, but number of members is bounded, and part of that bound is because everything that's going through the PSC is embargoed, and so having the non-embargoed work happen outside of the PSC in a SIG means we can bring hopefully a lot more person power to the table.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Tim and Aaron. So I had a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. One was, well, I'll ask the easy question first, which is, what was some of the obstacles to get you this far, right? We touched upon a little bit about like the boundaries between PSC, boundaries with SIG-Auth and stuff like that, right? So how were you able to navigate that stuff, and has it settled down, or is some bits still in progress?
Sure, I can speak to that a bit. So we talked with, in doing this, we talked with PSC, obviously, as that one was the kind of more already done conversation because we'd had PSC members help to create this. We got to have a number of conversations with SIG-Auth, and the last one was at their meeting a week ago, and that's yeah, we feel like that. We feel like any concerns about is part of what we're proposing for SIG security, something that SIG-Auth would want to be part of their part of their bailiwick, and we think we've really at this point gotten their buy-in, that they're pretty happy with what we're setting out to do, because this what we've written isn't what they are. Now, as part of that, we made a clear assurance, which is they had a concern, like, what if people come to SIG security thinking that SIG security is going to make decisions about say what the default behavior of the system should be in particular within authorization. And the clear promise that we've made, it's already part of our charter, and it's already called out as something that's not in our bailiwick, but that's we're not looking to own the code that you require for a running cluster. So we're not looking to own the code that SIG-Auth owns. And when people do get confused, then we're going to be really, really clear. Like, we've been in our charter, but we're going to be really clear as convention that that happens in the relevant SIG. So if you want something changed that really comes down to API machinery, then we're going to direct them to that SIG. And beyond that, we're also going to tell them about the conversations that have already happened. And that's one of the places where we think we're going to be able to save the SIGs a bunch of effort and make them a little bit happier. I've been calling it that will serve as a local cache for questions about, like, hey, why can't we just do such and such? And say, well,
maybe I'll ask a specific question, right? For example, the PSCs and how we are trying to get rid of them and get people to use proxy-based mechanisms, Gatekeeper, OPA, that kind of discussions. How do you intend to work with SIG-Auth on defining, like, when do we deprecate? How do we go about deprecating? How do we make sure that there is an alternative? People are going to come and ask you because you have security in the name, right?
Sure.
So how are you going to redirect stuff to we don't do that here, go to SIGAuth, right? Is basically one of the things that stock phrases that you will have to use there.
Yeah, that's really good. So Aaron, Tim, Craig, Joel, cut in if you cut in as well as you like. I'm going to give you my just my off the cuff thought there. And in my mind, so we have the stock phrase. If you really want to, okay, I get you really, really, you're talking to you're talking to a contributor or just someone who has the idea, like you really, really hate pod security policies, you want them gone, you want to, you know that they're beta and they don't seem to be coming out, that they're not long for this world, and you want to accelerate the rate at which we're, moving to other admission controllers, like OPA Gatekeeper. I think that there are a few things we do there. One is we make it clear that SIGAuth is the place to go to talk about that. Another is that we can certainly write documentation that talks about we can write documentation about the downsides of pod security policies, about how much less expressive they are than if you were to go with something far more full-featured like OPA Gatekeeper with Rego. So we can also go to SIGAuth and talk to them, attend their go to their meetings and advocate strongly, and wherever else whatever else the existing practices are, to advocate strongly for pod security policies to, on the one hand, perhaps to die a swifter death, or on the other hand, to be better supported for a longer period of time, because clusters unfortunately live a lot longer than any of us expect. Does that hit your question?
So basically, you're joined at the hip at this point, and you got to make sure that the communication flows smoothly. Sorry, Tim, you were going to say something.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to elaborate a little on your specific example. That's a pretty interesting example because it's a case where we're moving from, or we want to move from core code in pod security policy to more of a best practices recommendation. And so pod security policy is very clearly owned by SIGAuth. Everything that it's managing has more to do with SIG-node. And we're kind of transitioning to more of a best practices recommendation model, which kind of falls more under the documentation piece. And this is actually a place where I think SIG security can really shine as kind of this horizontal effort. Something that came up a lot when we were discussing with SIGAuth, the other SIGAuth leads, was this concern that, well, SIG security is kind of working on these best practice recommendations, but they don't have the authority to kind of just make a declaration that this is the best way to do something. And so there's kind of this desire to say, well, it's really the responsibility of the SIG security members to bring proposals and bring the issues to the SIGs that really have the kind of final say. So going back to, Dim's going back to your example of pod security policy and Gatekeeper, SIG security might do some of the work to say, well, this is how we recommend using these things, and go to kind of bring those recommendations to SIGAuth and figure out what is the recommendation, how does it connect to pod security policy, and kind of piecing that together, and then also bringing it to SIG-node and kind of say, are we actually looking at the right set of controls? Are we missing anything? and kind of covering the bases there. Does that make sense?
Thank you. And one last thing from me, which is, typically, like Tim said, we've been outward, like, we have something, how do we get the word out? How do we evangelize what we have, kind of situation right now? Getting to the point where you're looking outside first and then bringing people in to the community, bringing operators, practitioners, that kind of people, that kind of work, which we haven't successfully done in most of, in some of our SIGs. I think that is a really good start, and we should definitely try to learn from what you all find out. So thanks for that. That's all I had. Back to you, Lucky.
I guess we have like 15 minutes more left, Christoph. Did you have quick questions?
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. So the first one, so I know you've talked about, you've discussed this with SIGAUTH, obviously, and the PSC and the working group security audit. Is there anyone else in the community as far as like, excuse me, other SIGs that you have actively engaged to speak about this and this proposal and how it might affect them, or are those the kind of major players?
Those are the major players that we were targeting. We thought we needed to talk to contributor experience, and we ended up getting a conversation with a member in Paris here and learned that wasn't that while we know we're going to be working with contributor experience as we try to help with the existing discussion forums, there's a Slack channel, there's a Google group. That's just, that's just part of what contributor experience manages. So we know that we need to pull them out of we need to pull that line out of our charter. But otherwise, those are the ones that I know of. Obviously, we talked
also SIGDocs.
Tim, right. We've had conversations with SIGDocs, and that resulted in a couple leaders in SIGDocs helping to write this charter and this letter.
Great. So two other quick things. One thing that I see, a part of the project that I know is neglected, that may actually be a decent match for SIG security is the CI around our security fork. It's kind of been battered around. It was the PSC that handled it for a while. It was SIG testing that handled it for a while, and then it just kind of got neglected. And it kind of feeds into one other point that I see as a potential benefit of creating a larger community of folks that are interested in security and having like a place for them to gather is, there's lots of parts of the project where we need to develop kind of like a trusted ladder of folks to get involved in parts of the project. The PSC is definitely one, and the PSC has kind of developed the associates program to kind of groom some trusted folks up into potential future PSC roles. But we do the same thing in like the infra working group, or contribax and testing, where you're administering different tools. But you need to, like, we don't necessarily want to bring a brand new contributor, right off the street and be like, okay, here's the keys, don't crash the car. So developing a trusted community of folks who are both interested, and giving them like an opportunity to, okay, here's how we can build some trust between like the community and you as an individual contributor, so that we can trust you to give you keys to certain things to help out with pieces of the puzzle. Like, if we're at a point in time where we don't have any like active security, like vulnerability, like embargo vulnerabilities that are being actively worked on in our security fork, it'd be a great opportunity for some folks, okay, here's some keys to our security fork, help us fix the CI here. And put in some work to like get the CI automation working better with our security fork. So when we do have an embargoed vulnerability come up, we have, you know, testing and that kind of stuff around it. Like filling in some of these gaps would be useful, and having a collection point for folks to kind of come into the project and say, I'm interested in these security pieces. How can I build trust within the security community in Kubernetes? I see that as a benefit. So those are just kind of a couple talking points I want to bring up, things to throw out to think about. But I also just wanted to say thank you all for doing the legwork that you've already done before you bring this proposal to us, because it makes it a whole heck of a lot easier on us when it's like, oh, there's so much data here. We could just, you know, most of our questions are answered somewhere in this documentation. We just need to go through and read it and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was the last comment I had.
Yeah, we had when we brought these pull requests and started engaging with members of steering, some of you said, well, we've got a whole bunch of people out of the office. We can't give you an answer back this week. And we're like, we've been working on this for a bunch of months. It's fine if it's delayed a few weeks. This is yeah, we're trying to bring you something that's fully baked and can get tweaked by steering, by interactions with community. But yeah, so yeah, thanks a lot.
Cool. So next steps, I guess, steering I think it'd still be useful to just go through the pull request, and then if steering members are good with it, we can just add our LGTMs and get it merged. Sound good?
Sounds good to me. We obviously have a lot of InfoSec people, so we can take care of the LGTMs for you if you, no, wait, that's not the kind of, it's not the kind of InfoSec people we are. We're not the ones who go to jail. We're the ones who contribute to projects.
I just want to say
this going over all those documents, and then I think we should probably add this to our agenda for our private meeting in 2 weeks, and see if there's any last comments on the steering side before we go forward.
Aaron was trying to say something.
All I wanted to say was, the process of working with steering has been really pleasant. Thank you.
Yeah, you all have given us, we've approached you and asked you questions, and it's been really friendly and helpful. So thanks. We'll be, so for those next 2 weeks, while you're reading what we've written, and after that, when you're discussing, we'll be available to you. You can grab us in Slack most easily, and we'll toss you a message in your public Slack channel to just kind of tell you some of our volunteers who are on shift to answer questions.
The working group security audit Slack channel is where a lot of us are. We're also available via DMs, obviously.
Yeah, mostly we'll be on the PR. So
that works too.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll be watching the PR.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, everyone. We do have 10 minutes more left. I had a bunch of items, but I think we can discuss those later. Paris, you had a few things you wanted to discuss. Given that we have 10 minutes, which one do you want to talk about?
Hold on, I'm getting out my agenda document that's in my 800 tabs. Hold on. Okay, here it is. I got it. Let's see. Annual report, CNCF update, and then just an FYI poll. So I guess let's talk about just working group stuff. I just want to see, is anybody having any issues with working group annual reports? Getting those in, talking to your folks, anything like that? More like a general discussion, nothing serious or due. They're technically due, I say due with bunny ears. Technically due at the end of the month. Has anybody gotten any reports back yet for review?
Hey, Paris, this is Derek. You know, the working group IoT Edge meets once a month. So I hadn't engaged with them until the 12th, which is their next meeting. So the only thing I was thinking was, given some working groups cadence of meeting, is if we thought we could get everything collected by the end of this month or not. But beyond that, for myself, I don't have more to report than that.
Okay, I just put on the notes IoT Edge most likely coming in September.
I'm meeting with Kate's Infra. Sorry, just an FYI, I'm meeting with Kate's Infra on Wednesday. I don't really foresee any problems there. It should be pretty smooth.
Component standard really took and ran with it. I believe we actually already have a draft into steering private to look over. I've skimmed it. I haven't read it over in like too much detail, but they really like ran with this. And I was very happy to see that. Policy I've engaged with, but contact has been a little bit more sparse there. I need to go follow up with them and poke the policy working group some more.
All right, any problems?
You probably saw an email from multi-tenancy. There was just some splits about who's doing what and how to do that. I still need to respond to multi-tenancy. I have a draft from API expression, so I'm working through that with them. So everything's on track. There was just a few questions, which I think multi-tenancy kind of speaks with. Maybe we can add some clarifying points about who's doing what and what's public and private. So I'm trying to tease that out. I have a thread going with multi-tenancy. I will respond to that mailing list.
And that was one of the exact points we kind of thought people might trip up on. So good, that's a good catch.
Yeah, I'll work through it in with you all, and then make any changes we need to the docs. But I assume that some of those questions everybody's probably feeling as well. So I'll work to try and at least get a PR in to help make it clearer. But the two working groups I'm working with are moving nicely.
Awesome.
Thanks, Paris.
Is Eeyore on? Let me look.
He is.
Yeah.
We'd have like a couple minutes left. Should we close down with a CNCF discussion / update?
Yeah. Let's do it.
How are things in your world / CNCF world / all the cloud native world?
Everson is fine. So if you have any specific topics to discuss, I'm happy to do it now.
Is there anything that is going on in TOC land right now that Kubernetes should be aware of, or we should keep an eye out for, or anything that we should give opinions on, anything like that?
I think that the only topic that is hot on the TOC plate that's related to Kubernetes is K3S, but I assume that you already had some discussions with TOC directly, and currently all the conversations are happening in public on the CNCF TOC thread, so feel free to jump in and share your opinions there. Pretty hot thread, so there are different thoughts about it, so let's take a look.
Thanks for that heads up, ER. From my side, from contributor strategy, there is tons of stuff that's going on with recommendations for requirements, stuff that we've kind of hit on previously, things like the multi-org, what used to be known as the diversity requirement, but it's really about multi-orgs and what's required there. That's still in discussion. I know Alexis had the proposal for if not this, then that, kind of like, if not, you know, multi-org, then steering committee kind of governance structure. That's still in discussion. DIMS actually brought a great idea about badging for governance to the SIG for the CNCF contributor strategy SIG recently. We're actually going to run with that. So we're doing a lot of work with badging. So for instance, on the README, it would say steering committee, yes, or, you know, more than 50% multi-org, yes, you know, kind of very similar to, you know, security badges and and all the other badging that y'all are familiar with. So we're running with that. Let's see what else. Oh, we did, there's also a project template repo going on. There's tons of stuff. Any questions in that realm that y'all want some clarity on? All right. And shout outs to Dims too for showing up like the night in the night.
Thank you.
With the badging idea.
Yeah. What threw me off there was like, you know, why single vendor is okay. Is that good or bad? Or, you know, that was basically what triggered me to jump in there, Paris. So, yeah.
Oh, it's a good idea that none of us had thought about, and everybody was like, wow, that makes sense. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Ihor, I did have a question for the MiniCube folks. Do we expect it end of this month or something? The funding for the AWS credits for MiniCube?
I hope so. So I submitted a request to AWS a few weeks ago. Should be processed during some time. So I'm regularly poking them, okay. But it may happen that, you know, like sometimes credits are not allocated immediately. Right. But yeah, I'm tracking that because not only MiniCube is blocked, but also some other projects are not able to use this benefit. But that's temporary, so we'll sort it out.
Yeah, I advise the MiniCube folks to not depend on this for 119 release, and maybe you know, it'll be there for 120. Basically what I told them. So,
that makes sense. Yeah.
The other thing, Paris, I wanted to ask was, I still haven't gone back through all the interactions we had with Priyanka to figure out what steps we still owe.
I need to do that too, by the way. So that's on my list for to do today, is to follow up on actions with Priyanka.
Okay.
Anybody else have any funding? Do we have any other funding stuff, CNCF? No? Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure we got that. Go ahead, Nikita.
Oh, there was one more funding stuff. Sorry, Nikita. One more funding stuff, which was in the email. I hope you all caught it. The Google funding stuff, you know, the grant from Google will last till July next. So by that time, we need to figure out a way of either extending that or coming up with new sources of funding. So I hope you all caught that.
Yeah, I think the next step was that Hawken was going to present something to Priyanka and us, or Priyanka is going to follow with us something on that. Cool. We are at time, so last call for anything pressing. No. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Nice talking to you all. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.